My name is Jessica Hille. I'm the Assistant Director for Education at the Kinsey Institute, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Dr. Kinsey and his legacy in my talk, Am I Normal? So, not to do too many spoilers, but the movie is about Dr. Kinsey and his work, and the sort of long-standing tradition at Indiana University of supporting the Kinsey Institute. Also, IU, not UI. There's some mention of the University of Indiana in the credits, which we didn't endorse. So, and Dr. Kinsey was and remains a pretty controversial figure. You'll see in the movie how the tide of support and detraction kind of ebbs and flows around his work in his lifetime and also since then. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Kinsey Institute today, our research, our art and collections, and the education program. So Dr. Kinsey and his team set out to learn what people do sexually in the United States. And to do this, they conducted almost 18,000 interviews. And Kinsey himself conducted almost 8,000 of them. If you've ever done research, especially if you've ever done qualitative research, you know that this is a huge number of interviews to have done, and an invaluable data set. So out of this massive collection of interviews and data, he and his team developed what is now known as the Kinsey scale. That goes from completely heterosexual to completely homosexual histories of behavior. I will also note that this is a model for understanding sexuality. Sometimes people will ask us, like, hey, can I take the Kinsey test? You tell me what my Kinsey number is. That's not really how it works. The scale is a representation of the data and what he was seeing by interviewing all of these people all over the country. So in the 1940s was when he and his team primarily conducted these interviews, traveling across the states and interviewing people about their sexual histories. And more people than you might think at the time were willing to talk to him and his team about their lives. Then in 1947, the Institute of Sex Research was founded at Indiana University. It became the Kinsey Institute after his death in 1956. And in 2022, we celebrated our 75th anniversary, and we're still going strong. So this question of, am I normal? This is one of the most frequently asked questions of us as sex researchers. And I think it's important to keep in mind the idea of normal versus common, because what Dr. Kinsey's research, what he and his team discovered, and as you'll see in the movie, was that what was normal in terms of being common or prevalent was a lot different than what people talked about as normal in the sense of socially acceptable or in accordance with the norms of the time. Also, our understandings of sex and sexuality evolve over time. The language we use, the things that we do continue to evolve and change and are relatively fluid, which is why there is still so much work to be done today at the modern Kinsey Institute. And this is one of my favorite Dr. Kinsey quotes, and it drives a lot of our research still today, that we are the recorders and reporters of facts, not the judges of the behaviors we describe. And you'll see also in the film, Dr. Kinsey was very strict about this with himself and with his team, about the interviews were to gather data. They were not about making judgments about people, about what they did or had not done, and that it was to be a completely safe and judgment-free environment when they were doing these interviews. Research at the Institute today is ongoing. We have a number of different research programs. I'll just tell you about a couple of them tonight. Our first sort of area is in sex and dating. We partner with the Singles in America study, which is the largest study of American singles. It's been going for over 10 years. And a new kind of emerging area in sex research that we're involved in is the use of sex tech, so the intersection of sex and technology. Pretty much any time humans have developed a new technology, we have figured out a way to use it for sex. And the same is true today with the internet, with artificial intelligence, with robots. So we are just beginning to understand the impact of that on our sex lives and our relationships. Sexual consent and trauma, of course, is also a very important area for research. The Sexual Assault Research Initiative explores sexual consent, both from the lens of how consent is given and communicated, and when that consent is violated, understanding victims and perpetrators of sexual assault. And the Stress Research Consortium studies impacts of trauma on sexual lives, not just sexual trauma, but any past trauma and the effects that it has on the body later in life, and including on our sexual functioning and sexual lives. Sex and aging is an area that we are sort of just now getting into, but we are currently studying sexual behavior and satisfaction among older adults, including sex toy use among women over 60, and the potential for masturbation to address menopause symptoms. I just had a birthday, so I'm very excited about this research because I would like us to figure this out in the next couple years. And then sex and identity, this is where a lot of my research sits, looking at asexuality and aspectrum identities, LGBTQ plus healthcare and experiences, health education, and the intersections of race, gender, sexual health, and access to contraception. Another huge part of the Kinsey Institute is our library and special collections. Dr. Kinsey started collecting art and artifacts and documents from all over the world, and people would send him materials, and he amassed this, this collection that he then donated to the Institute for Sex Research for $1, or sold to them for $1. Today, we have over 600,000 individual items in the collection, including 7,000 art and artifacts spanning 2,000 years of human history, 80,000 photographs and prints, and just an untold number of documents and paper materials. Digitization projects are starting to make the, both to preserve the collection and make them more accessible to people who aren't fortunate enough to live in or make it to Bloomington. And then the education program, this is my, kind of my wheelhouse at Kinsey. We run the Ph.D. minor in human sexuality at IU. We also have a medical education branch. I teach courses for the School of Medicine here in Bloomington as part of the scholarly concentration in human sexuality and health. We also run human sexuality intensives, which are 4-day kind of intro to survey of human sexuality and both foundational concepts and then the current research and findings that we are continuing to produce at the Institute. And we have 2 sessions in 2025, one in February and one in May. And then we are also just this year going to introduce what we're calling specialty intensives. That'll be a 1-day deeper dive into a particular topic. So any of the things we cover in the human sexuality intensive over 4 days could be their own book, their own semester-long course. But this is an opportunity for us to dive a little bit deeper. And our first one will be this summer on sexual fantasies with Justin Lee Miller. And you can find out more about these programs at the link down there, knsy.in/edu. So, I don't want to take up too much of the time. The QR code will take you to our homepage, and I'm happy to answer a couple questions if anybody has any before the movie starts. Yeah.
Is there anything, given that we're about to watch the movie, that we should keep in mind as maybe outdated or misrepresented?
So it is a dramatization and not a documentary. So, you know, we don't know that every conversation and every interaction that was portrayed in the movie actually happened. You know, Kinsey's work was highly controversial, but there have been various allegations made against the Institute over the years that have all been debunked, and none of that's really portrayed in the movie. But I think, yeah, just keep in mind it's a dramatization and not a documentary. But I think what it does really well is show first, on both the human toll of this kind of massive research. You know, Kinsey was a collector. He also did research with gall wasps, which they touch on in the movie. There's a whole other Kinsey collection at the Natural History Museum of these wasps. So the human toll of this kind of almost obsessive, long-term, huge kind of research, and the social context in which it was done, right? So I think it gives you a good sort of flavor of that, but it is a drama. Yeah.
You referred to art collections,
Mm-hmm.
what items you show, and you said that there's going to be greater access in case you happen not to live in Bloomington. Is that collection at the Kinsey Institute? Is it somewhere else? And people who are local, do they have access to that currently?
So, yes, sort of. We have too many items to store on site at our, like in our offices, so they're stored in facilities at the university. When people are interested, it is possible to visit the institute. You can make an appointment, and we have a gallery. The Caroline Beebe Art Gallery is now open and has sort of a what I call a sampler platter from our collections. And we also have researchers and students and faculty come who want to use things from the archive. So for example, if they want to access the Masters and Johnson papers that we have, they would reach out and make an appointment, and then we would bring those items in. So you do have to, for a lot of the things, you have to like physically be able to get to Bloomington. But there are some things that we've digitized in partnership with an organization called Adam Matthews, which I think is now AM Digital. And it's a fairly slow process, but it is starting to make some things available digitally. Yes. You can access that through the collection section on the website. Yeah. Anything else? All right, well, that's enough of me. Without further ado, please enjoy the show.